The carbon tax just went up on April 1st. How much will this cost you? Or how much will it help you? Hey guys, it's Adrian here, the Canadian in a t-shirt. And today I'll break down the cost of this new carbon tax increase versus how much we receive in rebates. I'll give a quick summary of how the carbon tax works, the new changes for 2024, and then I'll do a deep dive into my own numbers. How much I pay into the carbon tax through gasoline and heating versus the rebates that I receive. I know this is a heated issue, especially now with rising costs across the board. But you know me, I leave the politics out of it. I just stick to facts, numbers, and dollars. No name calling, no rage baiting, just facts. So please keep it civil in the comments. For the rest of this video, I'm not going to mention the names Pierre or Justin. There's a lot of strong opinions out there. On one hand, we gotta axe the tax. On the other hand, they say that 80% of Canadians benefit from the carbon tax. That's a tough number to believe. We all see the prices going up. So for this video, I want to put it to the test. So how does the carbon tax work? To try to reduce our consumption of fossil fuels, we pay a tax whenever we buy gasoline for our cars, natural gas to heat our homes, propane, really any kind of fuel. Some provinces, like BC and Quebec, have their own provincial system, but for the rest of Canada, we use the federal carbon tax. By charging an extra tax on fuel, that applies pressure on the big spenders, namely big businesses and wealthy Canadians, to reduce their carbon footprint and switch to more energy efficient options. But for the rest of us, everyday Canadians can't afford a $60,000 Tesla or a solar panel roof, so it wouldn't be fair to punish us with an extra tax. That's why we receive a carbon tax rebate 4 times a year to compensate for this extra tax. We still pay the carbon tax up front, but we get most of it back, sometimes even more with the rebates. This is tax-free income, and the amount depends on which province you live in and the size of your family. If you live in a rural area or you have kids, you'll receive more in rebates than I do. As long as you file your tax return every year, you will receive this rebate, no matter how much or how little fuel you consume. It used to be called the Climate Action Incentive. That's what you see in your bank account, but now it's called the Carbon Rebate. Again, this doesn't apply to British Columbia or Quebec. So, what are the changes for 2024? Starting this week, the carbon tax has increased by 23% on all fuel purchases. No, that doesn't mean that the price of gas just went up by 23%, just that the carbon tax portion of it increased. And remember, the rebates have also gone up to balance it out. At gas stations, this tax hike means that the price of gasoline just went up by 3.3 cents per liter. Today in Waterloo, Ontario, gas costs about $1.56 per liter, and of that, about 17 cents is carbon tax. Before the increase, carbon tax was 14 cents per liter. So it's not nothing, but it's not the end of the world either. It's about 10% of the total cost. Yes, we will be paying more upfront when we buy fuel, but we'll also receive a larger rebate every 3 months. Let's go through the math to see which one wins. Do I spend more or do I get more? For me, I pay carbon tax in 3 ways: gasoline for my car, gas heating for my home, and indirect costs. Basically, the cost of transportation goes up, so grocery stores and retailers likely bump up the cost of their goods, and this trickles through the whole economy. This indirect cost is a tough number to estimate, so I'll save that discussion for the end. I want to focus on the cold hard numbers that I pay, starting with gasoline. I drive a 2015 Hyundai Elantra, and she's pretty fuel efficient. On the highway, I average between 6 and 7 liters per 100 kilometers, so definitely more efficient than the Canadian average. Since I use my car for business uses, I track my mileage. Here's my odometer. I take a picture every year on January 1st. For 2023, I drove a total of 9,938 kilometers. I also keep all of my fuel receipts. I went through each one for this video, and I logged the numbers to calculate my carbon tax. I spent a grand total of $1,262 on gasoline for the year, and my average fuel price was $1.53 per liter. You won't see the carbon tax printed on the receipt, but it's easy to calculate based on the liters of fuel. For the first 3 months of 2023, the carbon tax was 11 cents per liter. Then on April 1st, it bumped up to 14 cents. Now in 2024, it's increased yet again to 17 cents. But back to 2023, you can see the calculations here. Each time I filled up, it cost me between $2 and $5 in carbon tax, for a grand total of $112 for the year. But that's not all. It sucks, but we do pay tax on the tax. we have to add sales tax. In Ontario, it's 13% HST. So the total carbon tax I paid for my car in 2023 was $127. That's literally 10% of my entire gasoline expense. So far, I've paid $127 in carbon tax. Next, let's look at natural gas for heating. Recently, I moved to a condo in Toronto with electric heating. No gas, so no carbon tax for me. But for the past 5 years, I've been living with my brother here in Waterloo, and I still spend about half my time here. In fact, I still film all of my videos here in my brother's living room. So for this carbon tax experiment, we'll use my brother's house. It's a 2-bedroom townhouse with central gas heating. So yes, we pay carbon tax. And luckily, they break it down in the bill. See here. Naturally, we pay more in the winter. February was our heaviest month. We had a total gas bill of $112, and the carbon tax portion of it was $14.88. Our lightest month was August, barely used any gas. A total bill of $42 with only $3.84 in carbon tax. Once again, we pay sales tax on everything, including the carbon tax. So we have to add 13% HST to our numbers. For the whole year in 2023, we spent a total of $776 on heating, and $110 of that was carbon tax. Since my brother and I split it 50-50, my portion of the carbon tax was $55. And remember, we each received the full rebate separately. So my carbon tax bill for 2023 was $127 on gasoline and $55 on heating, for a total of $182. That's how much I paid directly in carbon tax. In just a minute, I'll show you how much I received in rebates. Yes, I received more than I paid. But first, let me touch on the indirect costs of carbon tax. This is something to be careful of. The whole point of the carbon tax is to apply pressure on big corporations to reduce their carbon footprint. But a lot of these businesses will just raise their prices and pass those costs over to you, their customers. That's price gouging. They're literally stealing from you. It's a way to artificially inflate their profit. And while you're busy blaming the government, they keep the extra money for themselves. I'll illustrate with an example. Let's say I run an online business and I generate $100,000 in revenue. Now my internet bill increases by 5%. Would I be justified in bumping up my prices by 5% to make up for it? Absolutely not. That would be price gouging. My internet bill is just a small portion of my total expenses and a tiny fraction of my revenue. A 5% increase in my internet might cost me an extra $50. But if I raise my prices by 5%, that gives me an extra $5,000 of income. That's $5,000 I'm essentially stealing from my customers to cover a $50 expense. Watch out for companies who try to do this. In my example, if I wanted to break even and pass off the entire cost to my customers, I would only increase my prices by 0.05%, not 5%. Keep that in mind. Okay, so for the year, I spent a total of $182 on carbon tax. How much did I receive in rebates? $488. That's right, the carbon tax actually made me money. In the end, I made a profit of $306. Since I live in Ontario and I'm single, I received $122 directly into my bank account 4 times a year. Here are the screenshots in June, July, October, and January. So for me, with my reasonable lifestyle, the carbon tax isn't so bad. I paid $182 up front, but I received $488. That's an extra $300 in my pocket. Now in 2024, the carbon tax is increasing. Yes, but the rebates also go up. Let's assume that this year I'll use the same amount of fuel and gas. With these new carbon tax rates, I'll pay a total of $225 in carbon tax. But my rebate for 2024 increased to $560 here in Ontario. So I'll earn an even bigger profit of $335 this year. If they decide to axe the tax, I lose this money. They cut the tax, but they also cut the rebates, so I will lose $335 this year. These are just my numbers, but if you live like me in a reasonable home with a reasonable car, getting rid of the carbon tax will lose you over $300, maybe more. If you have kids or live in a rural area, you get a much larger rebate, so you could be losing $400, maybe $500. Run the numbers for yourself. Now, if you live in a giant home that costs a fortune to heat up and you drive a gas guzzler, a fancy sports car, you'll probably be happy to axe the tax because you're paying more than you receive in rebates. But again, that's the whole point, to apply pressure on those at the top who can afford to make these energy efficient changes. The economists claim that 80% of Canadians receive more from rebates than they pay into carbon tax. And now, based on my numbers, my parents, my brother, and a few of my friends, yeah, I believe it. If they axe the tax, I will lose money, and so will 80% of Canadians. Hey, I'll never tell you guys what to do. It's up to you to do what's best for you and your family, so vote for whoever you want. But if you're not in the top 20%, axing the tax doesn't help you. The top 20% will benefit from cutting the tax, but the rest of us won't. Just something to keep in mind. I'd love to hear your story and your numbers on the carbon tax down in the comments. Are you paying more or receiving more? Even if you live in BC or Quebec, I'd love to see some real numbers from real Canadians. I wanted to keep this video nice and simple, but there's a lot more to talk about. I can make a whole separate video on the carbon tax effects on the economy and inflation, with studies and reports from economists and the Parliamentary Budget Office. It's a lot of numbers and stats, but let me know if you're interested. Make sure you watch the rest of my Canadian tax videos, especially for important tax changes in 2024. Click the pop-up here at the end screen. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you guys on the next episode of The Canadian in a T-Shirt. Bye guys!